People may forget what you said, but they will never forget how you made them feel. If you want to be interesting, start by being interesting. The secret to influence is not in talking louder, it's in listening deeper.
When most people walk into a room, their first instinct is to wonder how they are being perceived. Am I dressed well enough? Do I sound confident? Will people respect me? That instinct is natural, but it is also the reason why so many fail to connect deeply with others. Because in those moments, the focus is entirely inward, when in reality, influence begins the moment we shift our focus outward. The ability to win friends and inspire others has less to do with how you present yourself and more to do with how you make people feel about themselves in your presence. Think about the people you enjoy spending time with. Chances are, they are not the ones who dominate the conversation, listing their achievements or showcasing their brilliance. Instead, they are the ones who lean in, who make you feel as though your story matters, who listen without rushing to share their own. They leave you walking away not thinking about them, but about how good you felt when you were around them. That is the subtle yet profound shift from self-centeredness to other-centeredness. And it is the foundation of meaningful influence.
Most of us underestimate the human desire to feel important. At the core, every person carries an invisible sign that reads, "Make me feel valued." This is not arrogance, it is human nature. From the moment we are children, we crave acknowledgement. Our drawings on the fridge, our name called out in class, our effort recognized by a parent or teacher. As adults, that craving does not disappear. It only changes shape. Now it comes in the form of being heard at work, being seen in our relationships, being appreciated for what we do. When we learn to shift our attention from ourselves to fulfilling that basic human need in others, we step into the rare space where true friendship and influence are born.
This shift does not require dramatic actions. It starts with something as small as genuine curiosity. Instead of thinking about what clever thing you can say next, ask a question about the other person's life. Instead of rushing to tell your own story, pause and invite theirs. It is astonishing how often people go through conversations without feeling truly listened to. In a world full of noise, being the one who offers presence is like being a rare treasure, and people gravitate toward those who make them feel heard.
But shifting the focus is not just about listening. It is also about celebrating others. Most people spend their lives waiting for applause that rarely comes. They do their work quietly, they put effort into their families, they sacrifice, and often they go unnoticed. When you step into their lives and offer genuine acknowledgement, when you recognize the effort they put in, when you admire the strengths they may not even see in themselves, you create an emotional bond that is unforgettable. And it's not manipulation, it's connection. Because when recognition is sincere, it becomes a gift. Imagine a workplace where instead of competing for attention, people competed to lift each other up. Imagine friendships where instead of racing to be heard, people slowed down to truly listen. Imagine families where members made it a daily practice to notice and appreciate one another. That shift from self to others has the power to transform not only individual relationships but entire communities. Yet here's the paradox. When you stop trying to impress others and focus instead on valuing them, you ironically become more impressive. People remember you not for your words but for how you made them feel. They speak about you not as someone who always needed the spotlight, but as someone who gave them the gift of significance. This is influence in its purest form, subtle, lasting, and deeply human. There's also an important mindset here. Shifting the focus from yourself does not mean diminishing your worth or silencing your own voice. It means recognizing that the fastest path to being valued is by first giving value. It means you stop approaching interactions as opportunities to prove yourself and start approaching them as opportunities to serve. It means replacing the question, how can I get this person to like me, with how can I make this person feel seen? That one shift rewrites the entire dynamic of human connection. Think about leaders who inspire loyalty. They are not remembered only for their intelligence or charisma, but for their ability to connect with people at a personal level. They remember names, they ask about families, they show genuine interest in the lives of those they lead. That kind of leadership is not about authority. It's about attention. It's about making the person in front of you feel like the most important person in the room, even if only for a few moments. The truth is, anyone can talk about themselves. Anyone can list their accomplishments. That requires no special skill.
But to set aside your ego, to shift your focus, to genuinely make someone else the center of attention, that requires discipline, humility, and awareness. And because it is rare, it is powerful. The people who practice this consistently are the ones who build networks that last, friendships that endure, and influence that spreads far beyond themselves. Every interaction is a chance to practice this. In the checkout line, do you glance at your phone or do you smile and acknowledge the cashier? In a conversation with a colleague, do you think about your next response or do you truly listen? With your friends and family, do you only share your struggles or do you pause to ask about theirs? Influence is built in these small everyday choices. The more you make the shift, the more natural it becomes, until focusing on others is no longer a strategy, but simply who you are.
There is a profound difference between appreciation and flattery. Yet too often, the two are confused. On the surface, both may sound like compliments, but one builds bridges while the other quietly erodes trust. Flattery is shallow, calculated, and self-serving. It is given with the hidden motive of getting something in return. Appreciation, on the other hand, is genuine, heartfelt, and focused entirely on the other person. While flattery fades quickly, true appreciation leaves a lasting imprint on people's hearts.
At the core of human behavior lies a deep need to feel valued.
This is not vanity, it is survival. For centuries, recognition has been tied to belonging. In ancient tribes, being acknowledged meant being accepted, and being accepted meant safety. That instinct hasn't left us. Even today, in boardrooms, classrooms, and households, the desire to feel seen and respected drives much of our behavior. When someone expresses real appreciation for who we are and what we contribute, it fulfills one of our most basic emotional needs.
But here's the challenge. People can sense the difference between genuine appreciation and empty flattery. Think about the times you've been on the receiving end of flattery. Someone tells you you're amazing at everything, but you can feel it's an exaggeration. They don't really mean it. They're saying it because they want something: your approval, your favor, your attention. In that moment, instead of feeling valued, you feel manipulated. Now contrast that with a moment when someone gave you specific, thoughtful appreciation. Perhaps a colleague who said, "I noticed how patient you were with that client. It made a huge difference in the outcome." That kind of recognition lands differently. It feels real, it feels personal, and it makes you want to give even more of your best.
The key lies in sincerity and specificity. True appreciation does not come from generic words, but from noticing the details that others overlook. Anyone can say, "Great job," but it takes real attention to say, "The way you handled that situation showed incredible empathy." Anyone can throw out praise, but appreciation is rooted in observation. It means you were present enough to notice, thoughtful enough to reflect, and kind enough to express it. This is why appreciation strengthens relationships. It communicates to the other person, "I see you, I notice you, you matter." And that message is far more powerful than any rehearsed compliment. In fact, when people are consistently appreciated, they often rise to higher levels of performance and generosity. Recognition draws out the best in others, not because they feel pressured, but because they feel valued.
There's also a personal transformation that happens when you shift from flattery to appreciation. Flattery keeps you focused on what you can extract from people. It's about manipulation, about putting on a mask to gain approval. Appreciation, however, shifts the focus to what you can contribute. It becomes less about your gain and more about giving the gift of encouragement. In that shift, your relationships stop being transactional and start becoming transformational.
Consider the impact of appreciation in a workplace. Employees who feel genuinely appreciated are not just more engaged. They are more loyal, creative, and collaborative. They are willing to go the extra mile, not out of obligation, but out of inspiration. Contrast that with an environment where leaders rely on flattery or offer praise only when they need results. Over time, people see through it and trust evaporates. True leaders build cultures of appreciation where acknowledgement is not rare but woven into the fabric of daily interaction. The same principle applies in families. A child who hears constant empty praise like "you're the best" may grow up skeptical, sensing the hollowness of those words, but a child who hears "I'm proud of how hard you worked on that project" develops both confidence and resilience. Appreciation validates effort, not just outcome. It recognizes character, not just success. And in doing so, it nurtures growth.
What makes appreciation even more powerful is its ability to heal in strained relationships. Where misunderstandings or distance have taken root, sincere appreciation can act as a bridge. It can soften defenses and open doors that have long been closed. Even in moments of conflict,
Pausing to recognize something you genuinely admire about the other person can shift the entire conversation. Because appreciation says, I value you beyond this disagreement.
There's also an element of humility required to give real appreciation. You must slow down, notice others, and admit that they bring something valuable to the table. This requires stepping outside of your own ego and recognizing the worth of someone else. It's not always easy, especially when pride or competition is involved, but it is precisely in those moments when appreciation carries the most weight.
And here's a truth worth remembering. People rarely forget how you made them feel when you appreciated them. They may forget the words you used, but they will never forget the feeling of being seen. That memory lingers, it shapes the way they view you, the trust they extend to you, and the loyalty they give in return. Appreciation plants seeds that grow into long-term influence.
To live with this principle is to make appreciation a habit, not a performance.
It means training yourself to look for the good in people, even in small things, and acknowledging it out loud.
It means resisting the temptation to flatter for short-term gain, and instead choosing to value others for who they truly are. It means understanding that influence does not come from clever words, but from authentic recognition.
Most people think they are good listeners, but in reality what they are doing is waiting. They wait for the other person to stop speaking so they can deliver their own story, their own perspective, their own solution. Listening in that way is not listening at all. It is rehearsing. It is preparing your response while the other person's words pass over you, like background noise. When that happens, you miss the very essence of what is being shared. True listening is not about waiting for your turn. It is about stepping into the world of the other person and making them feel understood. The human need to be understood runs deep. When someone tells us their struggles, their dreams, or even their small daily frustrations, what they are really asking is, do you get me? Do you hear me? When the answer is yes, when they sense that you are fully present with them, something profound happens. Walls come down. Trust is built. Influence begins. Because the people who feel understood by you will naturally gravitate toward you. They will seek your company, your counsel, and your leadership, not because you told them what to do, but because you made them feel safe to be themselves. Listening to understand requires presence. That means putting aside the constant urge to check your phone, to think ahead, to multitask. It means giving the other person your full attention. Think of the last time someone gave you undivided attention. They weren't distracted, they weren't rushing, they weren't waiting to cut in, they just listened. Didn't it feel extraordinary? That is because in today's world of endless noise, attention has become the rarest and most valuable gift you can give. When you listen with presence, you make the other person feel like they are the only one that matters in that moment. And that feeling is unforgettable.
There is also a deeper skill within listening. Empathy. Empathetic listening is not about agreeing with everything you hear, but about trying to see the world through the other person's eyes. It is about imagining what it feels like to carry their burdens, their fears, and their hopes. When you respond from that place, your words carry a different weight. Instead of saying, I know how you feel, you might say, that sounds really difficult. Tell me more. Instead of rushing to fix the problem, you might simply sit with them in their struggle. Sometimes influence is not about offering solutions, but about offering presence.
Listening to understand also means silencing the ego. The ego always wants to interrupt, to compare, to one-up. Someone shares a story about a challenge they faced, and the ego rushes to say, oh, that reminds me of the time That urge may feel harmless, but it shifts the focus away from them and back onto you. In doing so, you rob them of the chance to fully express themselves. The discipline of listening is the discipline of letting the spotlight remain on the other person. It is resisting the temptation to make it about you and instead giving them the dignity of your full curiosity.
In professional settings, this principle transforms relationships. A manager who listens only to reply will never truly know their team. They will hear reports, but not concerns. They will catch updates, but not emotions. And over time, their people will stop sharing honestly because they know they are not being heard. But a leader who listens to understand creates an environment of openness. Employees begin to share not only their successes, but also their struggles because they know their voice matters. That kind of trust creates innovation, collaboration, and loyalty that cannot be manufactured by policies or perks. In personal relationships, the difference is just as powerful. Think about conflicts with friends, partners, or family. Most disagreements escalate, not because of the issue itself, but because both sides are too busy defending their point of view,
to truly hear the other. The moment one person shifts from arguing to understanding, the entire conversation changes. When you listen with the intent to understand, you disarm tension. You signal your perspective matters, even if it's different from mine. And often, that simple act softens the other person enough to listen in return.
Listening in this way requires patience. It requires slowing down the pace of conversation, allowing pauses, and being comfortable with silence. Silence can feel uncomfortable, but it is often in the silence that people gather the courage to share what they really mean. If you rush to fill every gap with your own words, you might miss the truth that lies beneath their surface story. Giving people the space to unfold at their own rhythm is one of the greatest acts of respect.
There is also an art to the kind of questions you ask while listening. Superficial listening leads to questions that skim the surface. How was your day? Did you finish the project? Deeper listening leads to questions that open doors. What was the most challenging part of your day? How did that make you feel? These kinds of questions communicate genuine interest, and they encourage the other person to share more of their world with you. Every meaningful connection is built on these layers of curiosity.
Listening to understand, not to reply, is not a technique to manipulate people. It is a way of being. It is choosing to place value on others, to honor their voice, to believe that what they have to say is important. And in return, you gain something priceless: insight into their hearts and minds. That insight allows you to build influence, not by force but by alignment. Because once people feel truly understood, they are far more open to hearing your perspective in return. In every interaction, you face a choice. You can listen for your turn to speak, or you can listen to step into someone else's world. One path leaves people feeling ignored. The other leaves them feeling valued. And people always remember how they felt in your presence. There is something almost magical about hearing your own name spoken with sincerity. A name is not just a label, it carries with it identity, history, and meaning. It is the word that has been spoken to you since your earliest days. The sound that has always signaled belonging and presence. When someone remembers your name and uses it, especially in a world that is often fast and personal and distracted, it does something profound. It makes you feel seen, and feeling seen is at the core of human connection. People often underestimate the power of recognition. They assume that influence comes from grand gestures or impressive speeches. But in reality, it often begins with something as small as remembering who someone is. Think about it. When you walk into a store, a cafe, or a workplace, and someone addresses you by your name, you feel a surge of warmth. It tells you that you are not just another face in the crowd, not just another transaction or number. You matter enough to be remembered. That simple act can change the tone of an entire interaction.
The opposite is also true. When someone repeatedly forgets your name, especially after you've introduced yourself more than once, it sends a subtle message: you are not significant enough to remember. That may not be their intention, but that is how it feels. And feelings create lasting impressions. People may forget what you said or did, but they will not forget how you made them feel. Something as small as using a name can be the difference between building a bond and creating distance. Recognition goes beyond names. It is about acknowledging the presence, contributions, and humanity of the people around you. To recognize someone is to affirm that they exist, that they bring value, that they are not invisible. Too many people walk through their days feeling unseen. They work hard at their jobs. They sacrifice for their families. They contribute to their communities, and often it goes unnoticed. When you step into their world and take the time to acknowledge them, you give them a gift more powerful than almost anything else: the gift of significance. In leadership, the power of names and recognition cannot be overstated. A leader who takes the time to learn the names of their team members, who calls them out in meetings for their contributions, who publicly acknowledges their efforts, builds loyalty that no paycheck alone can buy. Employees who feel recognized are not only more engaged, but also more committed. They are willing to give more of themselves because they know their work does not disappear into the void. It is seen, it is valued. In friendships and family relationships, recognition plays an equally important role. How often do we take for granted the people closest to us? We assume they know how much we care, but we fail to express it. We forget that recognition is not just about professional achievements. It is about everyday moments. It is about telling your friend, "I really admire how supportive you are."
It is about telling your partner, I notice how hard you work for us. It is about telling your child, I see the effort you put into this, and I'm proud of you. These small recognitions build emotional safety and deepen bonds. There is also a psychological dimension to this principle. People are far more likely to be influenced by those who make them feel important. If someone constantly overlooks you, ignores you, or treats you as though you are replaceable, you will resist their influence even if their ideas are brilliant. But if someone remembers your name, acknowledges your contributions, and makes you feel valued, you will lean in, listen more closely, and often align yourself with their vision. Recognition is not manipulation, it is alignment. It opens the door for influence by honoring the other person's humanity. What makes this principle powerful is that it does not require extraordinary skill. It requires attention. It requires caring enough to remember details, to say them out loud, and to let people know they are not invisible. In a world full of distractions, giving someone your recognition is like giving them a spotlight. You don't have to exaggerate or flatter. You just have to notice what is true and speak it. And that truth has incredible power. There's a story behind every name. When you use someone's name, you are not just addressing them, you are touching their identity. You are acknowledging their uniqueness. In a world that often tries to blur people into the background, that is why hearing one's name can light up a conversation, why recognition can change the entire trajectory of a relationship. It is not the sound itself that matters. It is the message beneath it. You matter. You are not forgotten. You are seen. Imagine walking into any space and making it a habit to recognize people. Imagine remembering the name of the barista, the security guard, the colleague who often goes unnoticed. Imagine not just using names, but also noticing effort and acknowledging it. Over time, you would not just build acquaintances, you would build loyalty, trust, and influence. People would not only remember you, they would feel drawn to you. Because while many can impress others with their achievements, few take the time to make others feel important. Recognition is one of the simplest yet most powerful ways to win friends and influence people. It is not expensive, it does not require talent, and it does not take much time. Yet it carries enormous weight because it speaks directly to the heart of what every human being desires: to be seen, to be valued, to be remembered. And when you practice this consistently, you set yourself apart as someone who does not just move through the world, but truly connects with it. The urge to win arguments is one of the greatest destroyers of influence. Human nature pulls us toward proving ourselves right, toward making sure others see things from our perspective, toward defending our beliefs at all costs. But here is the paradox: the more aggressively you try to prove your point, the less likely people are to embrace it. Logic alone rarely changes minds, because people are not purely logical beings. They are emotional, pride-driven, and deeply attached to their own perspectives. If you want to win people to your way of thinking, it cannot be through force. It must be through respect. Respect is not weakness. It does not mean surrendering your beliefs or avoiding difficult conversations. It means choosing an approach that honors the dignity of the other person while presenting your perspective. When you respect someone in a disagreement, you communicate that their opinion is valid, even if it differs from yours. And when people feel respected, they lower their defenses. They become more willing to listen, to consider, and sometimes even to change their stance. The opposite approach, attacking, criticizing, or dismissing, only strengthens resistance. No one likes to feel small. No one enjoys being made to look foolish. The moment you belittle someone's perspective, you are not just challenging their idea, you are attacking their identity. And when people feel attacked, they cling to their beliefs even more tightly. Not because those beliefs are right, but because their pride demands it. That is why arguments so often end with both sides more entrenched, not less. Respect dissolves that barrier. It says, I value you, even if I don't agree with you. And that simple message makes all the difference. To influence with respect, the first step is listening. Before you can persuade, you must understand. People are far more likely to consider your view if they feel you have taken the time to understand theirs. That means asking questions, not to trap or corner them, but to genuinely see through their eyes. It means listening without interrupting, even when you strongly disagree. It means saying, help me understand why you see it that way. When you do this, two things happen. You gain valuable insight, and you earn the right to be heard in return. Once you have listened, the next step is to build bridges, not walls. Instead of starting with your differences, start with your common ground. Maybe you share the same goal, but differ on the method. Maybe you share the same values, but interpret them differently. When you begin with agreement, however small, you create a sense of alignment. From that place of alignment, your perspective feels less like opposition and more like a contribution. People are more open to considering new ideas when they feel you are standing with them, not against them. Another part of winning people to your way of thinking with respect is humility. It takes humility to admit you might not have all the answers, that your perspective may not be complete, that the other person could teach you something too. This humility does not weaken your influence. It strengthens it. Because when people see that you are not simply trying to dominate, but that you are open to learning as well, they are more likely to open themselves to your influence. Respect creates reciprocity.
The language you use also matters. Words can either escalate conflict or invite understanding. Saying, "You're wrong," almost guarantees defensiveness. Saying, "I see it differently," keeps the door open. Saying, "Here's another way to look at it," feels less like an attack and more like an offering. Respectful language is not about softening the truth. It is about delivering it in a way that can actually be received. Influence is not about how loudly you speak, but about how well your words land.
Consider the leaders, teachers, or mentors who have had the greatest impact on you. Chances are, they did not force their ideas onto you. They did not shame you for being wrong. They guided you. They challenged you. But they always made you feel respected in the process. And because you felt respected, you were open to their influence. That is the essence of winning people to your way of thinking. It is not about winning a debate. It is about creating an environment where growth and change can happen naturally.
In personal relationships, this principle is just as crucial. In families, friendships, and partnerships, disagreements are inevitable, but whether those disagreements bring people closer or drive them apart depends on respect. If you argue to dominate, you create distance. If you disagree with respect, you create understanding. And sometimes, that understanding matters more than agreement. People do not always need you to share their view, but they do need to know you value them, despite the difference. That assurance allows love, trust, and connection to survive even in disagreement.
Respect also has the power to turn opponents into allies. History is full of examples where respect bridged divides that seemed unbridgeable. Leaders who approached conflict with empathy and honor often gained more influence than those who relied on force. Because influence built on respect lasts, while influence built on fear crumbles the moment fear is gone. Winning people to your way of thinking is not about conquering them. It is about guiding them, inviting them, and walking with them. It is about holding firm to your beliefs while also holding space for theirs. It is about speaking truth in a way that uplifts rather than diminishes. And when you practice this consistently, you discover that respect is not just a tool for influence, it is the foundation of all meaningful human connection. At the heart of human connection lies a simple truth. People long to feel valued, heard, and respected. The timeless principles of shifting the focus from yourself to others, offering genuine appreciation, listening to understand, remembering the power of names and recognition, and winning people to your way of thinking with respect are not just strategies for influence, they are foundations for living a life of impact.
When you turn your attention outward, you move from impressing people to inspiring them. When you give appreciation instead of flattery, you nurture trust instead of suspicion. When you listen to understand, you build bridges that words alone cannot create. When you recognize others, even in small ways, you give them the gift of significance. And when you approach differences with respect, you invite growth instead of resistance. These principles are powerful not because they are complicated, but because they are deeply human. They remind us that influence is not about control, but about connection. It is not about winning arguments, but about winning hearts. And it is not about making others admire you, but about making others feel admired in your presence.
To practice these truths is to step into a way of living that elevates everyone you encounter. It is to move beyond surface interactions and into meaningful relationships. It is to create a ripple effect of kindness, trust, and respect that extends far beyond yourself. And in doing so, you not only win friends and influence people, you enrich lives, including your own.